Shaped inside my mother's womb, born a free man, free to walk and live like others do. I breathe in and I breathe out. Yeah, something I don't even think about. Then an enemy arises and takes me by surprise, trying to choke my hopes and dreams. But then I lift my voice and scream, I can't breathe, I can't breathe, how can this be? I can't breathe, you can't take my liberty, let me breathe. I am a life that matters, I can't breathe, let me breathe, hear me. I would like to live my life just the same as you. No more looking over my shoulder in fear of what you do to my wife, my children, my children's children, my family, my friends. As long as I breathe and I keep believing that I will see this end.
Hello and welcome, everyone. We'll just give you a couple of more seconds to do a live share on Facebook. We really want to have as many people on this platform as possible. There is so much going on today in our country. So much going on today. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Phyllis Everett. I am founder of Saffron Trust Womens Foundation. And we are here today to have a courageous and touching conversation. When he can't breathe, I can't either. And a much needed conversation that we really need to touch on in this nation. With that being said, I'm going to turn it over to our host to do an introduction, the one and only Ms. Kimberly Holliday.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Table Talk. Tonight, we begin a special series, When He Can't Breathe, I Can't Either. It's Saturday, which in most cases is self-care day, so I'd like to take this opportunity right at the top of the show to thank each of you for being intentional in joining us on your Saturday evening. My name is Kimberly Holliday, the Joy Facilitator, and I will be serving as your host this evening. I will skip the fancy introduction of who I am to leave time for what we are actually here to discuss this evening. In brief, I am a social psychologist, a book author, a radio personality, and a motivational speaker. We are unscripted tonight and prepared to engage you in yet another courageous conversation. This is the premiere show of a three-part series. This series is a direct response to the brutal killing of George Floyd and many others at the hands of law enforcement. We have come together tonight in solidarity to say enough is enough. When he can't breathe, I can't either. Who is he? I'm glad you asked. He is our fathers. He is our husbands, our sons, our nephews, our brothers, uncles, our friends, and even our neighbors. This is a movement, and we thank you for joining us tonight to support our Black men and young boys. The objective of this series is to bring an unfiltered awareness to the psychological impact Black women face as it relates to racial-related trauma. Tonight, you will become familiarized with the term unconscious bias, what it looks like, and how we are affected. Before I jump all the way in, I want to remind you that this is an interactive experience. We welcome your comments, your questions, and we will do our very best to respond to them in real time. So go ahead, like us, love us, and courageously share this as a watch party. The show lineup is dynamic to say the least. We are kicking off a conversation with a powerful powerhouse. I feel so honored to be among such greatness, wisdom, and knowledge. This evening, we have Angela Pye, advocate and author of A Black Mother Dying, Charlotte Moore, CNN international writer, executive producer of Black Bodies Project, and author of Benevolence in Black. Also with us is an activist for change, Miss Joyce James of Joyce James Consulting. And facilitating our dialogue is the founder of Saffron Trust, Miss Phyllis Everett. Behind the data of what we know about disparities are real life stories, which brings us closer to our reality and our truth. I want to go ahead and share a little bit about our panel before we get started. So, facilitating the dialogue tonight will be Ms. Phyllis Everett, and she is the founder of the nonprofit organization Saffron Trust Womens Foundation. She is a pioneer for disrupting the status quo and making an impact on critical social, economic, and health issues affecting minority women within the most marginalized communities. And I love her because she sees the very best in me. And she's serious about helping other women become the best version of themselves. Angela Pye, she is a wife, and she is the amazing mother of four brilliant Black young men. She is the published author of A Black Mother Dying. Angela has over 20 years of experience in child welfare. Angela holds a master's in business administration and a master's in psychology. She loves sports, which she kind of has to because she has four boys. And she proudly serves on the board of directors for Black Mamas ATX. Welcome, Miss Angela. Also with us is Charlotte Moore, and she is an international writer with CNN, and she currently lives in Atlanta, Georgia. She is the founder of More Media, executive director of the Black Bodies Project, and the author of Benevolence in Black, which is a portrait book celebrating remarkable Black people in Austin, Texas. This book aims to have the reader consider actually noticing and acknowledging your Black neighbors who each and every day make a real difference in the lives of their people and their communities. Welcome, Charlotte.
Thank you.
All right. And rounding out our panel, we have the Miss Joyce James. Miss James is from Port Arthur and now calls Central Texas her home. Beginning her professional career as a CPS caseworker, she rose to the Assistant Commissioner of Texas, CPS, and soon became the leader of the Center for Elimination of Disproportionality and Disparities at the Texas Health and Human Services Commission. Today, she is the CEO of Central Texas-based Joyce James Consulting. All right, without any further delay, I would like to turn it over to Ms. Phyllis Everett, who will be hosting and facilitating our conversation this evening. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Kimberly. And I am really ready to dive right in. I couldn't wait until this was going to air because this conversation is so needed in our nation. And I think women really need to hear what we have to say. So do men, and so do the leaders. We have a powerhouse of three women here today. So without further ado, I'm just going to start with one question. Well, not a question, actually a statement. When I decided to do this show, and I think about the psychological effects on the African-American women from the racial trauma that goes on in our community, I want to start by asking Angela Pye, with four Black boys and a husband, what does this look like in your world?
So what does that look like? When you talk about racial trauma and race-related trauma, I think back starting to even as far back as my childhood. I don't know if my mom even really remembers, but I remember her being director at a hospital, and the first time she got pulled over, only time I believe that she got pulled over, how demeaning the officer was, how he talked to her, how this woman who was a director was in tears and was frightened. That stuck with me as a child, and you're thinking about something that happened over 35 years ago, probably. And I think back to where I am now as a mom of 4 Black boys. Well, one would consider himself a young man. But I think back to their experiences and the fears that I have as their mother. I could go on for days about all the experiences that I've had, but I think the one that I share right now is thinking about my 18-year-old son, thinking about when he was a junior in high school, he was running in the area track meet to qualify for regionals. And another athlete, white athlete, shoved him in the middle of that race and he fell down and he wasn't able to finish completing the race. For him, as a 17-year-old child, he runs up to this boy like, "Hey, why'd you push me?" And immediately that white coach of that child ran over to him, cussed at him with expletives such as using the F word, called him a jackass. This is how he treated a kid as a coach. That wasn't what got to me the most as a mom. It was the fact that I know if my husband, who is also a coach, ever talked to an athlete like that, he would have lost his job. He would have never been able to teach or coach in the school district again. I think about my child who, as soon as he got his license, has been stopped over 50 times from the age of 16 to 18, just around the corner from our neighborhood. Not one time has he ever received a ticket. Can you imagine the fear as a parent that you have of every time your child leaves the home? And it's leaving the home, going into the systems that we're supposed to trust sending our children to. When your 5-year-old comes home and he's in tears because he's told that he looks like the color of poop. Or your 7 or 8-year-old hears at school that he's a coon and wants to know what that means. These are the realities that as a mom, I deal with every day. And I've been on the sidelines for a long time because I think people will see on social media, they'll see me post my children's football games and they'll see me post their track meets, but I've never been as vocal as I am now because it's just kind of been our life. It's just kind of been, you still have to go to work and put a smile on your face, knowing that you're working just as hard as your coworkers, but sometimes getting paid significantly less. Or knowing that when your child gets in trouble at school, that his punishment might not be the same as his white peer. And those are the things that I've had to deal with as a mother.
Thank you, Angela, for that. That just brings tears to my eyes. It just tears my heart up. And I know Joyce James, when we talk about unconscious bias and we listen to what's going on with Angela, what do you say to people when you're teaching them about some of these things that are going on and are affecting the African-American woman with their children or husbands?
Well, the first thing that I would say is oftentimes we will hear women tell the stories about what's happening to their husbands or to their sons or to their fathers. And we will think about it as a unique experience. And so it's really important to understand that the story that Angela is telling is the story of a people, that there are many, many, many people who share that same experience and those same stories. And I don't really speak about it in terms of the individual unconscious bias, because it is that when it's at the individual level. But when it happens in the way that it happens to the same people over and over and over again, then it becomes part of an institutional culture. And instead, I refer to it as institutional racism. And really, institutional racism deals with a long history of, how institutions have been set up and designed, how people have been socialized to see and think about people based solely on the color of their skin. And so, the pain in this is that these racist acts have been going on for a very, very long time. And they have had tremendous impact, stress, strain, caused depression for women. And it's had some physical and emotional effects. And, you would hope that it's one incident and that it goes away, but it's constant. And it happens so very frequently that you can barely free yourself of it. That's why you will hear Black people say, every day when I get up, I have to think about the fact that I'm Black or what I will experience today, because it's become a way of life and it has significant impact on the body. And so we worry about it. And it's been happening for generations. Let me just say, it didn't just start. It goes all the way back to slavery, when Black men were lynched, when they were beaten so badly in front of their children, in front of their wives, and the pain and suffering that the whole family experienced as a result of that. And I'll just say quickly that we know, for example, that the physical impact on women really is associated with the fact that they have to deal with the stress of racism over the life course. And that is one of the primary reasons why women have early and preterm births, and why Black babies are more likely to die during their first year of birth, even when the mothers do everything right. And then, the other side of that is that the disproportionate rate at which Black mothers die during childbirth or soon thereafter, even when you account for factors like income and education. So it has to do with this built up stress of always having to wonder what's going to happen to your loved one. And in this instance, we're talking about what's happening to Black men. And finally, I'll just end by saying that the stress is really ramped up when we think about how many more times can we say, do the right thing, when we are already doing the right thing. And doing the right thing often still leads to death.
Yes, Joyce, thank you for that. That's so good. And it does. It's catastrophic all the time. And I want to go to Charlotte when I think about the work that you do with the Black Body Project and the voices of the ones that you've heard. You've done interviews with people all over. Tell us a little bit about some of those experiences and maybe some of those stories that really tie into Angela and what Joyce talked about.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say thank you for putting this together, Phyllis. These are important conversations that we need to have. I'll be 49 years old this year, and my awakening with regard to racism was very recent, because growing up, I was just talking to my brother last night, growing up, I didn't see racism. I didn't have people calling me the N-word. I didn't see it. It took doing some of these interviews, meeting Joyce James, listening to a lot of what she has to say, to have me begin to understand the significance of systemic racism, that it's not so much about the things you may or may not hear, but the fact that this nation, at least, is rooted in this idea that some people are better than other people. So I'm a storyteller. My background's in journalism. That's what got me going. I tell people too that this was not me. And I'm not saying that what I'm trying to put together is a huge thing, but I'm saying whatever it is, something was working through me, because as lazy as I can be, I was getting up, lugging my 2 little cameras to all these people and asking them questions, very basic questions. What does it mean to be Black? The commentary I got from them was, it was life altering for me, because I saw so much of myself and what I feel about myself in them. And that's when it began to kind of click for me that what's happening in our culture, what's been happening for hundreds of years
Yes.
is intentional. And we are all sort of playing this game with it. And so some of the stories that were told, absolutely. One mother in particular in the film, Black Bodies, I asked her, did you give your son the talk? She said no. The reason she said is, I don't want my son to have to walk out in fear. But when she said it, it was how she said it. She sort of looked down and thought about it. And she said, I don't want him to have to step out in fear. I want him to be free. But she was holding on to that fear. That's a big deal. And even if she didn't tell him, kids are smart. I'm sure he picks up on that too. But these stories, while they are stories, if someone says, that's an anecdote, that's just how he feels, that's just how she feels. What Joyce James says is that those feelings are rooted in data. And that's what's moving me to do this.
Wow, that's really good. I love how the mother carried the story that you just illustrated. The mother carried it.
Right.
And so this is why we need to have this platform, because all of this visible kind of oppression and a kind of abuse towards our Black men and our Black children, we carry it in such a different way. And so, like Joyce says, it does affect our health outcomes, our numbers, the data. You can't change that.
It is also affecting our homes very deeply. And if our men are sad and they're supposed to be the head of the household, you can imagine what's flowing down to the rest of everyone. And you don't even have to say anything. You can just feel that energy. All of a sudden, you know, our normal TV shows that we watch, we're not watching those anymore. We're making sure we're tuned in to CNN to make sure we're staying up on what's going on and how we need to move and operate in our world these days. And then, you know, as I talk to a lot of parents, many of them are not even having conversations with their kids just yet about what's going on, because why? We don't know how.
That's so true.
Yeah, you know, and I would just say too that what is happening is socializing our children as to who they are, and it counters everything that we tell them they are, right? And so people will say, well, you know, I have a video that I show in my workshop. It's called A Girl Like Me, and you all may have seen it. But it was a video that was used back in 1954 with the argument for Brown versus Board, where Black children would pick the white doll over the Black doll for every positive attribute. And that was, that kind of thing was done again about 7 years ago with the same outcomes. And so people will often say, well, their parents should be telling them that they're smart and they're beautiful and they can be anything they want to be. And I say we have to believe that parents want the same thing for their children that we all want for our children, but that the messages that we get in society so counter the things that our parents tell us we can be, that sometimes moms in particular won't have those talks, because it really serves to further make our children internalize that they are inferior. It kind of goes back to my saying, how many times can we say, do the right thing? And I said, well, I am doing the right thing. You know, what more can I do? So people began to internalize that it must be something about them. And that is really how racism manifests. It's called internalized racial oppression. And it operates in two ways: superiority versus inferiority. And so white people get messages that they internalize and hold to be true, that tell them they're smarter, better than, that they know what's best for people of color, that it's their responsibility to develop programs and services to fix us because we are broken. And we have heard those messages and had that kind of relationship with all systems and institutions for so long that we often believe that we are inferior. And so there's a lot of work that we have to do to really keep ourselves strong enough to help our children in particular and men and adults to overcome those feelings that our lives are worthless, because that's what we've been told. And that is one of the reasons why it's so easy for us to be murdered. You know, I can't imagine any other reason why an officer would have put his knee on the neck of a person for 8 minutes and 46 seconds had he not felt that this person's life did not matter and it was inferior. And we have been socialized to believe that. And so mothers carry that pain every day to try to counter the stigma of those messages that our children get.
And speaking about the pain that mothers carry, mothers struggle with, how do you have those conversations with your children? And what do those conversations look like? Because as a mother with my oldest son, I wasn't having the same conversations with him that I'm now having with my 10-year-old, because I was trying to raise him that, you know, he is equal. He does get the same things. He is going to be treated the same. And I started, as I got older, and I started seeing the experiences that he had when he had a 4.9 GPA, but yet he wasn't selected for National Honor Society because they didn't count his hours, but the same hours that his white counterpart submitted that I signed off on as a vice president of the Booster Club, they counted those. And when I'm seeing this happen to my child, now I'm having a conversation with my son talking about, Tyrus, this isn't okay. And because of how I raised him, he makes another excuse for it. Or I'm trying to tell him, hey, your teammates are going to toilet paper somebody's home. You can't go with them, because the reality for you is you're going to end up in juvenile detention center. They might not. And that's hard as a parent, because then it's like, what message do you give your child? Because you don't want to give them that message that they're inferior. But with people dying, unarmed Black men dying, I see my husband, I see my kids, I see myself when I look at Breonna Taylor. That could have been me in bed. They could have served the warrant on the wrong house with me. I look at Tamir Rice, who was playing with a toy gun. That could have been any one of my boys. And a lot of their friends that are white, they don't understand why my kids can't play the same video games as them. The reason being is I don't want my child going out to a park with a toy gun and ending up a hashtag like Tamir Rice. And that's the stress that we have to look at things completely different. How I parent my sons is completely different. But it's the reality, because it's the messages that they receive from the different systems that we're involved in. And it's hard.
You know, and I want to give Charlotte an opportunity to speak, but as Angela talks about the messages that we get from different systems, the same people get the same messages from the same institutions. Mm-hmm. And so racial inequities look the same in every system and institution, be it education, be it child welfare, be it juvenile justice, be it criminal justice, be it health, housing, employment. That is what makes it systemic. You know, if we only saw this racism impacting people on a small scale or in a few places, then we could say it's about individualized racism, right? Now, I'm not excusing people being accountable for their implicit bias and racism, but if we don't change the culture of institutions, then those institutions give police officers permission to go out and kill unarmed Black men. That's why it's not enough to just get rid of the officer or the chief, because that's the bad apple response, right? It does not hold systems accountable for creating a culture where everyone is accountable. So when it's easy and palatable to use the language implicit bias, but if institutions are not using the language institutional and structural racism, they're treating the symptoms and not the source of the problem. And so we need to have this foot of oppression lifted off of us, off of our Black men, off of Black women, off of our children who are suffering every day, and more believing that they don't live up to the same standards or they're not valued in the same way. If life was valued, it would not be so easily taken away. if all lives were valued.
I remember as a child questioning my worth because I was dark, and I heard that often, or because of your skin complexion or who you are. And those are the messages children get. You look at, I don't remember, it was hard to get a black Barbie doll when I was little. Like, why isn't that something that's normalized now? You even look, I asked a group of white friends probably about a year ago, we were having some discussions about race. And I said, if Lakeline Mall hired a black Santa Claus, how many of you guys would take your children there? And they were all honest and said none of them. But the reality is, we don't see this for our children, for our families, for us. If you even look at where we compare in wealth, okay, in the United States, and look at the impact that has on us. I don't know in 2020 what the numbers were, but in 2017, the median wealth for white families was $134,000 a year. The median wealth for Black families was $11,000. Think about the wealth and the median for families and the impact of families living in poverty, how they're viewed as less than, the comments that they receive. And as a mom, just even thinking about that, that goes into that systemic racism, that we're paid less, that we're treated as inferior, that we are less than. And it doesn't matter what your socioeconomic status is, the disparities still exist. And that's even in maternal health. You know, my book, based off a Black mother dying, I didn't have those experiences with my first 3 children. It was my last one. I almost died. Serena Williams, Allison Felix, the names, the stats are out there. And we're still dying at alarming rates. And it's understanding that.
Yeah, there's a lot, there's so much there. The diabolical nature of racism is that you were talking about the Barbie dolls, and I'll be honest, growing up, I probably didn't want the Black Barbie doll because every message I'd ever gotten, it was infused in me that the white doll with the long hair was what I wanted. I'm sure, yes, I don't recall ever seeing Black Barbie dolls too. There is that. But it's diabolical what it does to the person. And then something else that gets me, it's, you know, for people who say that this doesn't exist, it's when you think about systems and soldiers coming back from war and not being able to get loans, redlining, only being able to live in certain neighborhoods that were completely disregarded. The education system, our children going to schools that we know they are not on par with other schools. We know this. How do you expect a community of people to thrive when, again, that proverbial knee on the neck is there? It makes so much sense to me. Speaking again about the sons, one other story in the film, when we talk about mothers, a young man, his name is Nefete, he explains that he was a part of Future Farmers of America. And he said, you know, there aren't very many Black people in that group. There just weren't. His mother was driving him home with a friend. The friend happened to be, he said, half white, half Latina. But they're driving home, they stop at a convenience store. Before he gets out of the car to go into the convenience store, his mom says, take off your hoodie. He said at that point, and this is a high school kid, you know, he didn't understand why she was saying that, you know. He said this was before Trayvon Martin. He didn't understand it. He said, why? And she says, they'll probably think you're trying to rob the place. When we talk about how we talk to our kids, now she might not have had the talk with him, but it's in those kinds of messages, this reinforcement that something is wrong with you. Imagine that. I'm a mother, I have a daughter. It's a different dynamic. But imagine being that person who has to protect their child from the kinds of things you're talking about, Angela. And that is a daily thing. It is diabolical what racism does.
And if I might add, because I really want people to understand the pain that women have.
Yes.
So Angela and I both serve on the Black Mamas ATX board. And our work is all about saving the lives of Black mamas, not only that they live, but they also thrive. And so, you know, that the pain is so deep that in some of my workshops, women have said that they've decided not to have children because they are afraid they may have a son. Now that runs deep. But I can't tell you, not only in Texas, but in various places, sitting in that circle, doing that workshop and creating a liberated space for people to talk about these issues, that they're deciding not to have children because they already know what they will experience. It has been so institutionalized that we don't have to wait to see what's going to happen to our children. We already know what's going to happen to them. And so it's like always having to prepare yourself. And that's what I really liked about Charlotte's film, Black Bodies. I've had the opportunity to co-facilitate dialogue with her after the film is shown. But it's really about the stories that the people in that film tell is how they have to, as soon as they walk into a space where there's a white person, they already know what they have to do. Or they're trying to figure out what they have to do so that they won't be seen as a threat or whatever, because it has happened so many times to people who look like them based on nothing except the color of the skin. You know, if I could say, well, that's not going to happen to my son because he's well educated and he's a teacher. But what I know is that race is the #1 predictor of how we will be treated. None of those other things matter. And until they do, when they can't breathe, we can't breathe either, and we all die.
Come on.
We all die.
And what people don't understand too is, as Black women, we don't have the luxury to be silent, to stand back and continue to watch our sons, our husbands, our brothers, our uncles, our dads die. We have to speak up. And oftentimes when we speak up, then we're seen as that angry Black woman.
Right.
But the reality is we have to push the message. I know daily I'm communicating in social media right now because I have people in my life that don't get it, that don't understand, because their perception of me is I'm a good Black. What does that mean? Okay. I'm a good Black woman, so I won't experience anything like that. Yeah. You know, I have people inbox or message me when I share stories of my children, like, Angela, I can't believe that happened to you. Why? Because I have a good job, I'm educated, I have a nice home or a nice car. You don't think that that can happen to me? Well, it does every single day. I just choose to try to ensure that my children are resilient. I choose to involve them in lots of activities to try to steer them away from what's going on. But the reality is, many of those people that think that, they're not in our home at the end of the day when I have to explain to one of my sons why they weren't selected for this, or why they were treated for this, or why that person looked at daddy the wrong way or mommy the wrong way. Because that's our reality every day, and we carry that burden. That burden is on us, but yet we still have to wake up in the morning with a smile on our face to do our job, because many Black women in the United States are the primary breadwinner of their homes. And when you look at that and you think about that and what that looks like, okay, while you still live in fear and you're afraid to share some of your fears with your coworkers because their response is going to be, oh no, here's another talk about racism, because they don't believe it.
I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that. I wrote down on my notes that we might be participating in silent reinforcement. Charlotte mentioned that racism wasn't a part of her growing up. Well, it wasn't mine either as a military family. When we were overseas, if you were American, you were just American, right? If you spoke my language, we good. Um, I wanted to say that this is all new to me as well. With my Black friends, I may not be Black enough, right? And so, and then there's this other piece that I didn't really even know what systemic racism was and how deep I was in it, being that I adopted a white child at the age of 20 in North Carolina as a newborn, not realizing that this system actually tried to take my baby from me, telling me that white babies were in high demand. They held up my adoption for 12 months. They made me change her birth certificate. They just took me through a lot of changes. And as a 20-year-old, I just stayed quiet. And it's like right now we have an opportunity to give voice, and we need not be quiet anymore to these things that are happening. And I vow to speak up so that I can help some other woman, someone else feel liberated to speak up as well about this is not right. This is not supposed to happen. And then also too, that child is now 26 years old, and we need to have some discussions. And so I'm really glad again that we're here to have this dialogue, because her text message to me the other day was simply, "Mommy, you need to stay in the house because they're shooting Black people." Well, that made me really sad, because is she using her white privilege to be safe? Like, I don't know. We need to have some conversations. And then as a social psychologist, I just want to say to everyone right now that, while I'm sitting here in the camera trying to look pretty, I also feel myself wanting to cry. So I want to give everyone permission and space to feel all the feels. And again, thank you for being so courageous to be here. And those of you who decided to share this with your friends who might need to learn some things. So again, thank you for being here. This is an interactive experience. I'm watching my phone. We value your comments, and we definitely want your questions. So again, thank you again, Miss Phyllis, for creating this platform. And it's okay to cry. If y'all see my face leak, it just means I'm making room for more joy. And if by chance you are triggered, it means that you need to make a mental post-it note on something so you can take care of it later. Thank you.
You know what, I want to add on to that, Kimberly, a conversation I had earlier today. I want to be clear that because we're talking about systemic racism doesn't mean that we're anti-white or anti-police or anti-anything else. And that's been the message that I've seen come across to some people that I thought I was friends with. Because I say Black Lives Matter, I'm saying that they don't matter. No, I'm saying Black Lives Matter. And Black lives are the ones that are in danger right now. My son's lives are the ones that I worry about right now. And if Black Lives Matter scares you, then you need to take a good long look at yourself and see what about that message scares you. Because the best meme that I've seen since going, where we are right now is, if Black Lives Matter bothers you because you would prefer all lives matter, but you like Blue Lives Matter, then the operative word is Black.
And I would just add, Angela, that until Black Lives Matter, we can't say all lives matter.
Exactly.
Because it is very evident that right now, and for a long time, Black lives have never mattered at the same levels that the lives of white people matter. Now, the other thing, because Kimberly mentioned privilege, a lot of times, we talk about getting ourselves ready to speak out, but we have to speak out informed, right? We have to put ourselves in spaces where we become knowledgeable. We can develop a common language and a common understanding about institutional and structural racism, so that when we speak, we know what we're talking about. And often in my workshops, when I say white privilege or, superiority, whites have generally not felt good about that, until I said, if you think about the history in this country, white people didn't ask for privilege and they can't give it away. Systems gave it to them, right? And even when we think about things like how whites have benefited from every system and institution, yet they've been socialized to believe that they did it all on their own. And I'm not saying that white people didn't work hard, but the myth about coming here with nothing but the shirt on your backs and your family worked hard and you pull yourself up by your bootstraps. You know, this country gave white people the privilege of owning land, of being the only people who could be considered human, fully human, of having the opportunity to be educated, right? To be able to buy a home and build the suburbs when no one else could live there because of the FHA and home loan programs that were made available only to whites. And so white people didn't ask for that, and they can't give it away. But what white people who want to be accountable can do is to really begin to be in relationship with people of color, African Americans, Blacks, other populations of color, to hear our story and our experiences and to learn the true history, not of what is wrong with us as a people, but what has happened to us for generations in this country through no fault of our own. Now, it doesn't mean we shouldn't be accountable, but we are not broken. What's broken are the systems and institutions that have not served us in the same way that they have served and benefited and privileged white people. And that's how they were set up. Every system and institution in this country was designed by and for white people. And they are doing exactly what they were designed to do. They have continued to benefit, serve, and privilege white people to the detriment and disparate outcomes for other peoples. And so we have to understand that. So as we're marching, which I appreciate the rainbow of colors that are out there, but we have to have some common analysis and understanding about what needs to change in this country so that our men don't continue to be murdered. There was another shooting in Atlanta yesterday of a Black man. They actually found a 24-year-old man hanging from a tree in California. They're still trying to determine if it was a homicide. They just made the news said that they're going to investigate it as if it's a homicide. So, you know, it hasn't stopped. And it could happen to any one of our men, our fathers, our brothers, our husbands, our sons, our uncles. And so if something doesn't happen to change the culture of these institutions, you know, police officers have been socialized to be afraid of us, right? And so if there's not a culture created in law enforcement that begins to examine old attitudes, assumptions, and stereotypes that people have held to be true, because we train people, we even trained our staff in CPS about how you go into certain communities. And all across this country, I ask, and the story is the same. We're told, don't go at night, don't go by yourself, put your purse in the trunk before you leave, don't wear nice jewelry, make sure you check out and exit when you get there, right? All of those things that are well-meaning. But what do we already know by the time we get there? That we are afraid for our lives, and law enforcement officers are trained the same way. Now, I'm not making excuses for the murders of unarmed Black men, but I am advocating that we create institutional cultures that examine the messages that we send to the people that we send out with guns and with car seats to remove children from their families, and to teach our children in the education system and have low expectations of them, that we begin to examine that in a way and create a culture that does not support that.
And part of creating a culture, though, is not just the statements that many organizations are sending out, but changing the makeup of your executive leadership, changing the makeup of your board. My school district can talk about race all they want to, but I don't see anybody that looks like me making decisions that impact my children every day.
Yeah.
So it's understanding that as well.
So I have a question, and it's something I've been thinking a lot about. Again, as a storyteller, I come at this through, I welcome the idea of being a conduit through which people can tell these stories. And this is a serious question I have for Joyce. When you say change the culture, it seems like such an overwhelming, impossible thing to do. How do we, I believe in reaching people through their hearts and minds. If people can empathize with something, chances are they will take the time to listen to you. How do you go about changing a whole culture of this idea?
And let me just say, Charlotte, that when I say change the institutional culture, it's not meant to imply that there's not individual accountability that needs to go on at the same time. Mm-hmm. But think about it like this. So if we wait for every individual to get in touch with their implicit bias, what happened? And that's the message that we send. Mm-hmm. Because that's how it happens now. Institutions will send people to have conversations about individual acts of prejudice and bigotry and discrimination, right? Mm-hmm. But there's nothing within the culture of the institution to monitor and evaluate whether or not everyone is doing that. And so the only way they know when someone's not doing it is when the officer goes out and kills an unarmed Black man. And then they blame him and they get rid of him sometimes. But even so, getting rid of him doesn't stop it from happening, because if it were just about one bad apple, once we got rid of the bad apples, it should stop. But we're not developing a culture that supports people towards new learning and understanding of institutional and structural racism, to examine how we've been socialized to believe for years about people based simply on the color of their skin. And that we have measures and evaluative processes in place, and we're looking at our data and the outcome so that we know before people go out and make these mistakes, right? Mm-hmm. And so it would just take, we need to touch hearts, but if you leave it up to one individual at a time, it's going to take much longer than if we create an institutional culture that holds everyone accountable for how we're going to provide opportunities for equitable outcomes for all populations that we serve. And so there is no profession that requires its members to have an analysis and an understanding of institutional and structural racism. Not social workers, not law, not criminal justice, not health. Yet all of these systems produce the same disparate outcomes for the same populations of people. And so knowing that, institutions have to be accountable for the kind of professional development, for who they hire and bring in, for how they examine the people, the thinking of the people that they bring in, for how they hold people accountable for the messages that the institution has to give about how we're going to work. For example, in poor communities where we've been socialized to be afraid of everyone that lives there. You know, at one time when we were doing the undoing racism work in Child Protective Services, when staff got it, you would hear people saying, wow, when we used to get calls from that community, we just put the car seat in the car. Not intentionally, not deliberately. We are so deeply socialized that we are often not conscious. But don't leave it up to the individual to be conscious. Create an institutional culture that holds everyone accountable for being race competent. And there are ways to do it. Come to my workshop. I'll tell you how to use the Texas model that works when you are deliberate and intentional about addressing racism as the root cause. The institutional boxes, which are resistant to change, they start to give. Mm. Yeah. But you have to keep pushing, because as soon as you let up, they go back to their old way of doing business. And then we have a groundwater analysis about why that happens to people and what can be done to make some of the changes that we need to make.
Joyce, I
So you
love
and
your
I will talk more,
groundwater
Charlotte.
analysis. Yeah,
Okay.
airing next week, and I think everybody should listen to that groundwater analysis. It's
Yeah.
pretty powerful and awesome, and a good way to break it down so people can understand what systemic racism really looks like. You always do an excellent job at describing it, and I'm taking notes as you're talking and snapping my fingers. It's just so rich, but it's so needed in this environment right now.
And bring back the center.
I'm sorry?
I said, and bring back the center.
Oh, yes, and Angela Pye said that on our last series. We talked about you, about
Yeah,
having-
and and if I might just before we close, it's not to make anybody feel good about the horrible racism that's going on in the world.
Yes.
But we're not talking about racism in the old sense of racism, where we looked at individual acts of meanness, hatred, and bigotry, right?
Yeah,
So a lot
I
of
agree
that's
with that.
coming
I agree
back.
with that.
I won't deny that. A lot of that's coming back, but it's not so much about that as it is about how our systems have continued to operate. And so, if we together learn the truth about history, then it brings us across racial lines closer together and willing to work together to break down some of these institutional and structural barriers that have just locked some people out and continued again to do exactly what they were designed to do.
So I want to quickly answer. We got the question, Angela, how do we keep the stress down as a parent? Well, first, I want to start off with saying there's never going to be a way to completely minimize the stress as being a Black mom in today's society. 3 of my boys aren't home right now, and I worry about them when they're not in my house and they're not in my presence. But there are things that you can do to take care of you, self-care. For me, when I get stressed, I go running. I like to give myself a facial if I can't go right now with COVID and get a facial. Find out what makes you feel good and make sure you engage in those activities no matter how stressful your week is. Make sure you also engage in activities with your children where you're delivering message to them that they are special, they are unique, they are brilliant, they are amazing, which is different than the messages that they might be receiving in some of the systems that they're in. So for me, I know I have 4 kids and they're all treated very differently. Some people probably never realize this, but I tend to share the most about my second child on social media or whatever. And that's because he's the kid that, man, he's gone through it. From the time he was 5 years old to 10 years old, I can't think of a month that he's gone by that he hasn't heard some message of feeling like he was inferior and less than. So making sure that with your children, you're giving them a different message. So people probably wonder, oh, why is she posting this video about him again? He sees it. He's excited about the messages that he receives because he gets messages that he's less than at school. He gets messages that he's less than in the community. He gets messages that, oh, I can't play with you because my mom said you're Black. He receives those. So I want to make sure in every other aspect that I can of his life, I'm delivering a positive message. Yeah. I'm letting him know who he is and what God has blessed him with the ability to do. And so making sure that you do those things with your children, but leave time for yourself. As a wife and as a mom, I have to find time for myself, whether that's laying in bed and watching a movie, because you have to debrief or you won't make it. You won't make it with the stress that we carry every single day.
Wow, I can't believe the time has flown. We've been on quite some time and rich dialogue here, rich dialogue. I'm going to turn it back over to Kimberly and she could take us on out, and hopefully we'll have more streamers on next week. We'll be saving this video. You can please share it with the women in the community, the leaders in the community. Hopefully we've had a lot of people that have streamed on across the nation today, because this is a much needed conversation. And it's a different conversation than people are having. They're not really talking about the stresses of what the mother is going through. They're not talking about the stresses of what your sister may be going through because she has a brother who's African American. So we're having a different conversation here. So Kimberly, go ahead.
You know, Ms. Phyllis, not only is it a different conversation, I'm not gonna lie, it's a difficult conversation. It's very difficult. I've also been watching my phone kind of as a distraction, hoping somebody would send some questions and some comments. There's actually quite a few people who are watching, but the content is so rich, right? And again, I give space just for the fact that we're allowing you to uncover some things that you really don't even want to talk about or think about. But it's time for us to give voice to these things again. So again, I thank you, Miss Joyce James, for being here. I thank you, Charlotte Moore, for being here. I thank you, Angela Pye, for being here. Yes. I want to give some time here to allow our guests to share a little bit about themselves. And for instance, I need to know, Miss Joyce, share with us how we can get more information about your workshops on undoing racism.
Let me just first, we use the language undoing racism a lot, and my workshop is a groundwater analysis of institutional and structural racism. But I never want to lift up undoing racism without giving credit to the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. They helped me to develop the foundation for the work that I do, and they're dear friends of mine and allies all across this country. And so I do work in multiple systems here in Texas and across the country, been doing some virtual work recently. But more so in Austin, we're really focused on health, maternal health of Black mamas. And we are very diligent and intentional about the fact that Black women will only live and thrive if we undo racism. And so we are having some workshops. You can reach me at joycejamesconsulting.com. I'd be happy to discuss bringing a workshop to your system or community-based organization where we can talk more about this analysis and also about the work that I led at Child Protective Services for the state of Texas, where we developed a model that did reduce racial inequities and improve outcomes for all populations. And that's the ultimate goal. We want things to get better for everyone, but we don't want Black people left out of the process.
Thank you for that. Now, I feel like I know the answer to this, but for our viewers, who do you think needs to actually attend one of these undoing racism workshops? Who are they for?
They're for all of us.
Come on.
A lot of people assume that it's just for white people, but we have been socialized as Black people to believe what white people have wanted us to believe about ourselves.
Oh, I learned so much.
We have to get in touch with that so that we can undo our own internalized racial inferiority and the manifestations that come with that.
Come on.
So yes, we all need it.
Yes.
Thank you so very much for that. And Miss Angela Pye is actually the book author of A Mother Dying. And Angela, can you share with us a little bit about what your book is about?
Okay, so my book is titled A Black Mother Dying, and it deals with my experience of having my youngest son brazen, what I went through finding out about the fact that we're 3 to 4 times more likely to die as a Black mother trying to bring a child into this world. And it gives you a real life glimpse of my pregnancy and what I went through and how I almost didn't survive. You can find out a little bit more about that at ablackmotherdying.com. You can email me at apie@ablackmotherdying.com. The book is for sale on Amazon as well. I'm also the chair of Black Mamas ATX that deals with maternal health and outcomes here in the Austin area. You can go to blackmamasatx.com and research more about our organization there, as well as donate to help us fight those disparities in maternal health.
Thank you so very much. I also want to let you know that I saw your son on the news, and congratulations to him. And also, that is clearly a reflection of who you are.
Thank you.
I just want to give gratitude and appreciation to you.
Thank you. So if you're on here and you have not seen my son, 18 years old, my Facebook page is private, but I have that post set for public. I would encourage you to go look up Angela Pye and watch his story.
Absolutely. All right. And Charlotte Moore is here with us, and this is very special to me. I actually, as you guys can see, I'm working on my stuff. I have Angela's book here, and I have Charlotte's book over here, and look at that.
Aw.
We came ready today. This
Thank you.
is Benevolence in Black. This is a beautiful picture book portrait that shares and celebrates the stories of Austinites doing amazing things. Now, I'm excited about it because my picture is also in this book. I forgot about that.
Yes,
I'm like,
you're in
I'm
it.
in this book. And then not only that, when I opened the book and flipped through all the pages this morning, Joyce James actually forwarded this book. And so who knew that when you were putting this vision together that
Yep.
it would be needed for such a time as this? Now, I said too much, but Miss Charlotte Moore, I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk to us about why you decided to do the Black Bodies Project and what encouraged you to do Benevolence in Black.
Well, Kimberly, you're in that book because of who you are and what you stand for. And God brought me to Joyce James. What she just said, Joyce did about her workshops being for everyone. I've been to a lot of these workshops over the last 3 or 4 years. Joyce James has a way of making every single person in that room feel valued, feel heard, and it's for people who are ready to learn. People who are done, we say enough. People who are, they get it, they know, we all know. I tell the story about growing up in East Austin, it was all Black. At the time, that was normal. And even as I grew up, I thought, that was normal. It wasn't until later that I understood why that was, and you can look that up. But for 50 years, or however many years it was, that neighborhood of my life, was Black. And that says something about the power of a system, how it works. And I've learned all of that through Joyce James. So I will always give her credit for that. But this project, like I said, it wasn't me. Something said, go talk to your people, find out what they're feeling. And I did that. The Black Bodies Project is about, I want to wrap this up, but everything is so heavy right now. Everything is so heavy. And we're seeing a lot of images of people, Black people, involved with the police in some fashion. That does not define all of our community. We all have made mistakes. We are all learning. I've been arrested. We're all learning. The Black Bodies Project aims to show people through multimedia that we are as human as anyone else. We have the same beliefs, the same feelings. We're motivated by the same ideals. We like the same things to eat. We are human. And so that is the purpose, is to uplift this group of people. There's a lot of information at blackbodiesproject.com. All the information is there. And I thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this. This is amazing.
Okay, I just want to show y'all, like, this book, like a whole page, guys. I'm telling you.
You're worth that and more.
Yes, if
Much
you
more.
know who you need to know in Austin, who's doing amazing things, who's actually working in the community. I am from Austin, born and raised. I'm 46 years old, and I'm watching my city change. And so I hear you loud and clear. And I thank you for being intentional in what you do and for taking the time to do the Black Bodies Project and for writing this book. It is just about time for us to get out of here. I want to be true to the time. Again, I want to make sure you know how you can get in touch with Joyce James, and that is simply joycejamesconsulting.com. If you would like to order Angela Pye's book or be in contact with her, if you need to, hey, you know what? You should start a motivating moms group. I just made that up, right? You can get with her at ablackmotherdying.com, and we'll also put in the feed again her email. And then for Charlotte Moore from Media Moore, if you would like to get in touch with her, she has left Austin and she is now in Atlanta. And you know what? I'm glad to see you there. CNN is my station. That's my stuff, to tell you the truth. And you can get in touch with Charlotte Moore at blackbodiesproject.com. Also, I want you to know that Saffron Trust, we're not just here to be on camera. Saffron Trust is actually in the community making changes for women. In the last 7 weeks, Saffron Trust has given away over $65,000 in financial resources to women in Central Texas. Can I get a woo woo?
Wow.
Okay, because right now it's a lot of nonprofits that are just talking about it, but they're not just really being about it. So Saffron Trust is out there doing that. If you would like to get in touch with us at Saffron Trust, you may do so at saffrontrust.org. Also, again, like us and love us on Facebook. Now, as we get out of here, I want you to know that an hour simply was not enough time. It was almost kind of like ripping the Band-Aid off of a scab that's been there for a long time. My stuff is oozing. I want to let everyone know to give yourself time, be kind and loving to yourself this evening. I like to write. Do what you do for self-care, whether it be singing, turning up the music, putting on some crazy cartoons, whatever that thing is, be kind and loving to yourself. But make mental post-it notes of those things that are triggering you, because we need to have a conversation. We'll be back again next Saturday, the same time, 6 o'clock. And as I understand our same guests have agreed to come back. Woo woo. So I'm gonna hurry up and get us out of here so they don't get mad. So anyway, we'll be back next week, same time, having this conversation. When he can't breathe, I can't either. We're gonna continue having a conversation about how racial disparities are affecting and impacting us as Black women. Thank you all so much for being here. Have a wonderful evening.